Ruth Fine was a curator for the National Gallery of Art for 4 decades. First for the Lessing J. Rosenwald Collection in Jenkintown, Pennsylvania, then as curator of modern prints and drawings, followed by curator of special projects in modern art. In Washington, she curated dozens of exhibitions, studies of the art of Romare Bearden, Georgia O'Keeffe, Jasper Johns, and several printmaking workshops. She conceived and oversaw the Herbert and Dorothy Vogel collection, 50 works for 50 states. Fine has also written about Brandywine workshops and archives. Returning to Philadelphia, she organized Procession, the art of Norman Lewis, for PAFA in 2015, the catalog for which received the College Art Association's Alfred H. Barr Award for Museum Scholarship. In 2023, she received the Archives of American Art's Lawrence A. Fleischman Award for Scholarly Excellence in the field of American art history and the Print Center, New York's Award for Curatorial Practice. Co-curated with Fred Moten and currently circulating Frank Stewart's Nexus, an American photographer's journey 1960s to the present, will be at the Brandywine Museum of Art during the summer of 2024. Soon. Fine chairs the Roy Lichtenstein's Foundation and is a consultant to the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation. Allan L. Edmunds was born in Philadelphia and attended classes at the Samuel S. Fleischer Art Memorial and Temple University's Tyler School of Art, where he focused on printmaking and education. He earned his BFA and MFA from Tyler. Edmunds employs a variety of printmaking processes in his own work, including lithography, offset lithography, and screen printing. In 1972, Edmunds founded the Brandywine Workshop and Archives, a nonprofit visual arts organization that under his leadership has served as a center for the advancement of fine art printmaking. He helped to establish a network of satellite collections of Brandywine prints at 22 institutions across the country and built the artura.org free database of contemporary diverse art. Edmunds is also responsible for the formation of the Virtual Institute for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity in Education and the Arts, a collaborative venture of professionals in visual arts, art education, and museums. Edmund has continued his studio practice throughout his career. His art is in many collections locally and nationally. Please welcome Ruth Fine and Allan.
Feels like a birthday party. So many friends. So I'll start.
Okay, start.
We planned some questions. I can't read without my glasses.
Notice she's digital, we're analog. People read from their cell phones or their laptops or whatever.
Can I just make it?
I'm analog.
Our printer was down. Otherwise, I would have had this.
She would have.
Okay. Alan, first of all, you should know that Alan and I know each other since about 1970. So we've had lots of conversations.
A little closer.
Okay, right. We've known each other since 1970, so we've had lots of conversations over lunch and other things. So Alan, was art an important component of your home as you were growing up? And if not, how did you first become interested in making art the emphasis of your life's work?
Wow. First, my interest in making art. You know, people tend to gravitate to what they're good at. And I was told early on that I was pretty good at art, but I really love math. So I was conflicted. I wanted to be a math teacher. However, in 11th grade, I went to Fleischer Art Memorial here in South Philly and had a teacher named Louise Clement Hoff. And Louise was dynamic. She was beautiful. She was energetic. She was passionate about her teaching. And she gave me confidence, you know. I'm thinking I'm going to be a teacher, but I'm thinking I'm going to teach math. And she said, you know, Alan, you could be an artist. So she helped me put together a portfolio because I didn't have art in high school. And I was fortunate enough to go to Tyler School of Art. But in life, it's always sometimes that one person that can change your direction and help you build a longer journey, professionally or otherwise. So it was the inspiration of Louise Clement Hoff that convinced me to do that, but I constantly still wanted to pursue education. Tyler School of Art was local and offered both opportunities. So, second question about printmaking, I think it was. Right.
Also, whether art was important to your
Printmaking.
family.
This may sound crazy, but printmaking for me was a democratic medium. Coming from a low-income, predominantly, segregated black community of Philadelphia, there wasn't a lot of interest to the fine arts. People had family pictures, religious pictures in their homes. They didn't hang original artwork. So if you said you were going to study art, people didn't think much of it. So when I think about printmaking, though, it can address those people who were curious but couldn't afford it, as well as it invited collaboration. It invited interaction with other people. I could never think of myself being a painter sitting in my studio by myself painting. I couldn't, sculpture tends to be more collaborative. Today, practically everything is collaborative because of the technology and everything else. But back then, it just didn't exist for me. That need to want to interact with people and be a part of a learning setting. So printmaking was collaborative, it was more affordable, you could give it away, it could be seen in many locations at the same time because you had multiples. So it was democratic to me. It opened up the process and the medium and the field of art to people that were interested but thought it was something for the elite, something for people with money, et cetera, et cetera. So that was my initial attraction. It also flowed from the idea that I wanted to do something that was functional if I was going to make art, and that was graphic design. So I went from graphic design as a studio major to printmaking because of my printmaking teacher sophomore year was Romas Fiestas, celebrated international artist. And like Louise Clement, he inspired me, he encouraged me to really focus and pursue this. So it's those two people. Louise Clement Hoff confirmed to me the value of education and having a passion for something, and Fiestas gave me the tools and the medium to pursue it.
How did your family feel about it?
Well, this is interesting. I was very blessed because there were 8 kids, 2 died as infants. But out of the 6 remaining kids, 5 of us went to Saturday art classes at Fleischer. My mother could draw. She was very encouraging of her kids to do whatever they wanted to do. And so we all explored the arts. We were encouraged to do that. My oldest brother, he had a scholarship to go to Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, but he couldn't take it. He decided to get married and start a family instead. Again, because the incentives for pursuing a career in fine art were not there for people from the communities of color. Okay? I'm gonna throw you a question. Okay. Ruth, what inspired you to pursue a career in art? And how did your journey, starting as a studio artist, lead you to become an art historian curator? Let me preface, before she responds, let me preface by saying this. Back in the day, everybody started out as an artist. If you know anything about the field, we all started out studying studio art and then found our passion through probably instructors or reading and things like that. We were influenced. Ruth.
I don't agree with you.
Huh?
I don't agree with you. There are a lot of art historians who started out as art historians.
Oh, I know that, yeah.
Well, you said
but
everybody.
no, wait a minute. Let me rephrase that then. This is good. Let me rephrase that. Artists that I know, for the sake of getting income, employment, right? The great artists I know, they all taught. Some artists who weren't good at art may have decided they would go into art history and teach that, or go into curation. But in my world, these jobs were not open to a large bubble. They were very close, more legacy oriented than anything else. So when we talk broadly, we're talking about, how does the field grow? And I think the field has grown because artists have gone into the field and added to it. Yeah, I told you I was going to do that, didn't I? I told you I was going to do that.
It's fine, you can just put it on the, and then it'll stay in one
all right.
place.
Yeah.
And maybe,
I use my hands a lot when I talk.
because it's facing Ruth, maybe we could put it in the middle there.
It won't be any lower than that.
Okay. Thank you.
Go lower.
So does that more align with your thinking or your opinion? Let's have some controversy.
Maybe
answer your
maybe
question
help with this
first.
other hand. Hey, Alan, could you hold the mic in your other hand, because you're facing Ruth, and maybe that will help.
Okay.
There you go.
And I don't hear out my right side, so.
Yeah.
My mother went to art school and graduated in 1935. What was then the Pennsylvania School of Industrial Design, which is now University of the Arts. So I just grew up with it, seeing it in the house, going to museums, going to concerts, was very much a part of what I grew up with. And I was in the first class at Northeast High School when it became co-ed and moved from wherever it was to Oxford Circle or whatever it's called out there now. And it had an amazing shop program. It had print shop and weaving shop and clay shop. I seemed to be the only girl who spent a lot of time in the shops, which was also wonderful. And then I decided, it never was a question what I was going to do. I was always going to go to art school. I never was interested in anything else. I've since thought the other degree I wish I had was a law degree, but that's not because I wanted to be a lawyer. It's just because I think it would be useful to have that education. Anyway, so I taught for 10 years before so I went to PCA for undergraduate, majored in printmaking, basically because at that time, if you majored in painting, you had 2 days of painting and 1 day of painting techniques, and you couldn't take printmaking. Whereas if you had printmaking, you could take 2 days of printmaking and 1 day of painting, which has always seemed amusing because everybody thinks the technical thing is with printmaking, but at that particular moment, you could not, it was better to have the 2 things. So I took them both, and it turned out to be really good because there just weren't that many people interested in printmaking. So I got a scholarship to Penn for graduate school. I have no idea if in printmaking. I have no idea if anybody else applied for it. I don't remember there being any other printmaking majors, and it was an amazing time. The studios were in either the top or the bottom of what's now the Furness Library. I don't know what it's called now, but the Furness Building. And Gene Feldman, whose name must be familiar to you, one of the great offset printers in the world, set up an offset shop and took us to do some work at his shop, which was called Falcon Press. Did some of the most beautiful book designs at that time. And I also set up an etching shop myself down there. I don't remember why that happened. It was a very heavy period of civil rights, and the head of the department was as concerned with civil rights issues as art issues. When Fallcroft happened, a black family moved into Fallcroft, and there was all sorts of ugliness. And of course, it was when Kennedy was killed, 63, was it? Anyway, he was killed when I was in graduate school. It was an interesting time to be in graduate school. And by that time, I was married to my first husband. which was a good thing because I was connected to other artists, because the two principal teachers at Penn, aside from the printmaking person, were Angelo Savelli and Piero D'Orazio, who both really believed that women only belonged in the kitchen or the bedroom, and I didn't get very much attention from them, so I had my own kind of community that I could go to. D'Orazio's now is getting a lot of attention. I haven't seen much attention to Savelli. So when I finished, my first two teaching jobs were at Cheltenham Arts Center and at the Plymouth White Marsh Saturday Children's School. At which point I learned I could certainly not teach children, mainly because their parents drove me crazy. The kids were fine, the parents were horrible. So I dropped that as soon as I could. And then Ben Spruance, whose name is probably familiar to you as the printmaking god of Philadelphia at that time, he had been teaching at PCA and at Beaver College, now Arcadia University. And he stopped teaching at PCA, and at the last minute they asked me if I would take his Monday afternoon printmaking class, which I did. Take over it, teach it. And you can only imagine these kids who were waiting 4 years to get Ben Spruance walking into class and seeing me. They were so disappointed. But they had no choice, so they dealt with it. And then when Ben died, I was asked to take over the classes at Beaver. And during this period of time, I had spent a lot of time at Lessing Rosenwald's collection because Ben did. And he was teaching print history. There was no place to learn print history. And so I just went there. When he went there, I went there. When he didn't go there, and I pretty much learned the collection. And in 1972, I got a call from Lessing Rosenwald asking me if I would come be his curator. He'd had a fight with his curator, and I said, well, I have a job. I can't just come be your curator. We'll do it on the days when you're not teaching. And I knew the collection well enough to know that it would be a great opportunity, certainly not one I intended to keep for the rest of my life. At that time, I figured 2 years would be enough time to learn the collection, which I can tell you after 40 years I didn't really learn. But anyway, so that's how I became a curator. It was basically a total accident. And I stayed with the collection until we moved it to Washington, the prints to the National Gallery, and the books to the Library of Congress. And as I said, I went there for 2 years, but I kept looking for more interesting jobs. I always looked at the College Art Association bulletin of available jobs, and I just never found anything that drew me. So the next thing I knew, 40 years had passed. So that's the story of my life.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Rosenwald collection, in case there's people who don't know what it was?
The Rosenwald collection consisted of about 22,000 prints and drawings from the 15th to 20th century, and 7,000 rare books and 7,000 library books. And Lessing Rosenwald was the son of, not the founder, but the second in line of Sears and Roebuck. And he came to Philadelphia to open the Sears and Roebuck store on the boulevard that doesn't exist anymore. And he started immediately to collect prints, mainly contemporary prints by English artists, D.Y. Cameron, James McBay, and Muirhead Bone, who are very little known today. And then he got involved with Rosenbach, from the Rosenbach Foundation, who bought books for him, and he got involved with Dick Sessler, who was an art buyer, and he bought prints for him, and he just kept adding. By the time I got to the Rosenwald collection, he was 80, and he wasn't adding a lot. He had added, and still at that time he was still doing this. He'd been very close to Stanley William Hayter of Atelier 17, and anyone who went to Atelier 17 to study in France. Hayter was English, but he had a shop in France or in Philadelphia during the war, or New York during the war. And so he still saw the Hayter students if they came to visit him. But he was funny. He had no interest in anything photographic or photographs. And his drawers were a certain size, the storage drawers, and he would not buy anything that wouldn't fit in those drawers. So he had his limitations, which were amusing. It was a hard time because his seeing was bad, and so I used to talk to him. No, first his hearing was bad, so I gave him notes, and then his seeing became bad, and so communicating became quite difficult, but he was amazing, and I stayed in touch with his wife and really his whole family. His oldest daughter-in-law died within the last few years, and I'm still in touch with some of his grandchildren. Is that enough? Yeah. Any? Oh, it's my turn. Yes, it is my turn. Wait a second. Many of the images of yours have a strong autobiographical content, including the one I neglected to point out to you in the show downstairs, which was a terrible omission, which also is autobiographical. Why don't you talk about what your prints are about overall?
Well, we just had a historical narrative for you. We just had a historical narrative for you. The things that she said are not, to my knowledge, are not written in any book anywhere, you know. And these are the kinds of stories that need to be shared. Your history, your journey is so important. For me, what was that question again? Because I'm still listening to you in my head.
I'm asking you, how did autobiographical content become important to you?
Right. Okay. I have what I call my situation imperatives, where I can't, situation imperatives, things that I must do with my art. I never, while I love abstract artists, I could never see myself doing abstract art because there were messages and there were stories. I think I've lived a very special, kind of fortunate life in that early on, I was able to go travel Europe. Okay, thank you. Early on, I was, 20, 21, I traveled throughout Europe and North Africa. I spent a year in Rome. I'm from West Philadelphia. You know what I mean? And I saw the world with a different lens than most people in my circle. And there were stories that needed to be told. There was so much about life that my community didn't get a chance to experience, but I did. So the need was to share. Also, you had mentioned when Kennedy died. When Kennedy died in 1963, in November, I remember it clearly because we must have spent 2 hours transfixed to the TV, watching, the investigation, the funeral and everything. And that, from that moment on, that period, I consistently watched the nightly news. I started reading newspapers. This is 9th grade. I was in 9th grade at the time. But I was so connected to what was going on beyond my own community. And then later, having gone to college and early on experiencing my travels, everything for me was about telling stories. Then my parents died, very close to each other, relatively young in today's numbers. She was 66 when she died in 87. He was 72 in 92. And they left me the family albums. Now, today we get our cell phones and we, look at pictures. Back then, you could visit somebody's home and you say, tell me about your life or something. They bring out all these family albums and show you. And there was a lot of pride, passion with what they were sharing. And so I got the opportunity to be the archivist for my family. Then I find out, when I start looking into the research, that My father's family was from Northern Virginia. My mother's was from Salford, North Carolina. The cola meat plantation. There was a lot of documentation on my mother's side. Okay. And then because I had, for a short period, studied photography, I was drawn to the old photographs. The imperfections drew me in because the imperfections tell you something about time. Just like paper fades over time, photographs, the quality of photographs and its imperfections could tell you something about the time, the technique, the cameras, whatever that were being used. Not like today. You know, we get high resolution photographs. You know, we all know the progress they've made with the camera on a cell phone, let alone digital cameras. So there's not this tendency for imperfection or sense of time. So the old photographs drew my attention. What they shared, what it shared about my family's legacy, which actually, it got quite famous. They did a book on cola meat plantation and the fact that these descendants, my descendants, the slaves, did better over time than the overlords. And there was a book written about the Harrison clan, and it was profiled on 60 Minutes, the writer in that story. So I have a very important story on my mother's side. On my father's side, Babyface Edmunds is a relative, a distant stretch, right? But if anybody saw the movie Soul Food back in the 70s or 80s, whenever that came on, I don't remember, but there was a movie on it was Soul Food, and Babyface Edmunds was the producer, and it told the story of his family. So there was so many things that, because I was paying attention, I was getting exposed to all this information and all these connections. So passion to present the family story. I call it the Family Album Series. It's been going on for 30 years now. But I try to present it in a universal way because at the core of society is family. You know, then we move to neighborhood, we move beyond that through religion or whatever. But the core of society is the family. So if I can present that and start a conversation of some reflection on the resiliency, the struggle, the importance of family, then I'm doing something meaningful with my art, as opposed to doing abstract art, which there needs to be some understanding, some knowledge, some reference to be able to understand why that's an amazing piece of art when it doesn't talk to you if you don't have that training or experience. You know? So I wanted to communicate with my audience. And so all my work has been about telling stories. There was the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa. So you'll see Nelson Mandela. The piece downstairs is a tribute to not necessarily Martin Luther King, but his family. Because we see the leader when we engage with things. We see the first person. But the people behind that leadership, the family and the sacrifices that they made, unearned sacrifices, redemptive is what's in there. And so I wanted to tell a story because his sons, his wife, and the people close to him had to sacrifice a lot for him to be out front. And then he, of course, made the ultimate sacrifice. So, okay, so I want to ask you, you are very well respected within the museum community. I can go all over this country and say Ruth fine and people perk up and smile. That's respect. Earned respect. What excites you most about your profession and why?
Every project is different. You know, you can do 50 exhibitions and every one of them has different challenges. Certainly it's different if you're working with living artists or dead artists, or dead artists' families. A retrospective is very different than an exhibition. It's just a piece of a career. The research, the uncovering of information, and also watching people respond to the exhibitions. You know, it was always great to be, you know, this is all my National Gallery years, this doesn't happen anymore, but, you know, for 32 of the 40 years I would be in Washington and go out and see people looking at shows. And the way shows can transform things. I mean, the Romeo Bearden show was the first exhibition by a black artist at the National Gallery. Well, the population was totally different than the population the week before, or the exhibition before. And also, I don't know if this is true everywhere, and I certainly don't know if it's true now. I don't think the museum field right now has anything to do with the museum field as I knew it. But it was a real community, and you know, you would bump into people and hear about their families or what their projects were, and you know, you worked with different editors and found out what their style was, and different printers. So it just never was not interesting. It never was boring. It certainly was never a 40-hour-a-week job. It was more like a 400-hour-a-week job. That was okay. I was married to a painter who only wanted to be in the studio, so it didn't matter where I was, which was fine. That enough?
Yeah.
All right, I want you to talk a little bit. Allan was a public school teacher through much of the years. He was running Brandywine, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you managed to be a public school teacher, keep Brandywine going, some of the ways Brandywine's reputation spread around the world for various projects you did. So,
I was greedy. I'm still greedy.
we talk it to
There's no
the
other
mic.
way to describe it. There's no other way to describe it. I'm greedy. I was greedy. I'm still greedy. I wanted a career. I wanted to do something meaningful in the world. I wanted a family. They needed to be supported. I wanted to make sure there was a roof over their head, food in the belly, and whatever else was necessary. Okay? You can't see, going back to early comments about opportunities in the field, you know, there just weren't a lot of opportunities for artists of any race, any background, any style, you know. There were few positions in college teaching. Colleges, a lot of colleges didn't even have an art department. So I needed to have a job. I needed employment. Because if I was going to take time away from my family to be in the wider world trying to get something accomplished, I needed to know that everything was fine. I am blessed. I'm in the 51st year of my marriage. I've been married one time. 51 years. She's been with me, my wife Ann has been with me for the entire ride. And I met her through the print center, same as I met Ruth. She was the head of the Prints in Progress Community Outreach Program. And so our partnership is about love and family and giving something back to the community through the arts. You know, I didn't know it was going to be like it is, but I knew I wanted to do something meaningful because, again, I had opportunities and I'd seen the world from a different lens than most people in my circle. Now, they're not going to always understand it, but when I taught, I tried to be a role model, I tried to be a mentor, because frankly, very few students came into the art class thinking that this person is going to inspire them to have a career in art. Okay?
So you were teaching art in the public schools?
Yeah, I taught art, but rarely did I have a true art student in the class. Somebody that had the talent and wanted to go further, you know. So the challenge was always convincing and placing a value on art in their life and in their study and learning. Because if anything, trying to understand higher math and stuff, it's abstract unless you become an engineer or something like that, where you act architect, where you actually use what you're teaching, what you're learning. Okay? But art teaches you to think beyond. It really is such an important part of education. So my challenge was always with these kids, trying to see value in learning about culture, different cultures, creative expression, because it's proven, studies have proven that if one is in constant activity with creativity, they do better on academic performance.
So how did Brandywine fit into this picture?
It was no more than an extension from the educational side, because I would tap the best, most interested, let's say not best, but the most interested students, whether they were looking at a career in art or not, to join me and do internships after school, follow me to Brandywine. And most of it, for probably the first 35 years, all the interns came from schools, from our art classes of our artists that would send kids to us. So, and education is such a connection to community. I was fortunate enough, I stayed at one school for 22 years, but the community was Center City because it was the Parkway program. We didn't necessarily have one building. We used the resources of the city. The Art Museum, the Art Institute, I don't know if we ever used PAFA, but we used boardrooms of businesses and things like that. So that fed into this idea of exposure. If any of you are parents, one of the most important things you can give your kids is evaluation of education, then go out and give them exposure. As much exposure as you can to culture, to museums, to the zoo, whatever. That's how you nurture a young person to become a responsible citizen.
So how did you choose the artists for Brandywine?
Well, I did. Early on, we put together an artist selection committee, and they would decide who would come, and anybody could apply. As time moved on and we had opportunities for larger, more significant grants, then the competition was different, and we might go to former artists, many of which were educators and art historians. But we go to the former visiting artists and ask them, this is the program we're designing, who would you recommend for this program? So it became more, let's say it became less open to a general public. But for many years, it was open to the general public. Times changed, the foundation initiatives and their focus changed, and sometimes you just have to align with what they're interested in funding. So, and with the competition, my wife was the founding director of the Philadelphia Culture Fund. It had just over 100 groups that they funded. Now it's close to 400. Time moves on, more attention to the arts and culture. And I'll say that one of the things that happened, next week, they're dedicating the school board headquarters to Constance Clayton, who was the first woman, the first black superintendent of the Philadelphia schools. They're dedicating the building in her name, and I'll get a chance to speak, and I'll speak about how she gave support, she helped advance the idea that every school should have an art teacher, whether it be in visual arts, dance, music, or whatever, And all throughout the financial challenges that the school district has, this is something that most of the following succeeding superintendents have tried to maintain. So that creates jobs for artists, and also includes creativity, creative expression as part of the curriculum. So,
You also did outreach projects as part of Brandywine's program.
oh yeah, we did, let me preface this by saying that there wasn't a lot of support for Brandywine. Throughout, we're 51, 52nd year now. But I'd say for the first 40 years, I had to find support outside Philadelphia because there wasn't a lot locally. Okay? The black community didn't understand what we were doing because it was inclusive. We've worked with Native American artists, Asian, Latino, and a number of white artists from here, Europe, and even some Russian artists. And people didn't understand that. So if you see something, you don't know what it really is because you've never been exposed to it before, it's hard to figure out what the value is. And so we went nationally, and we did programs nationally, and sometimes people modeled their program after us. Like Cole Rogers said, the workshop in Minnesota. He said, I modeled our program after Brandywine.
When I was talking about the community programs of painting walls and that sort of thing.
You're going back, Ruth. See, we got such a long relationship. Everybody knows about the mural arts, right? Okay, let me give you some history. The mural arts started, I think, 86. Brandywine was doing murals in 72, 3, 4. We really beefed it up in 75 when Sam Gilling was doing a residency at the same time. He was doing seahorses on the outside of the art museum, if you can go back that far, 1975. He was the first artist to hang artwork on the exterior of the museum. And that was seahorses in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. But we, in 1970, I think it was 77 to 80, we got a CETA grant. Now, CETA was the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act. It was a federally funded program that passed through the states and then through the cities where there was high unemployment. It was to employ the unemployed and the underemployed, give them full-time jobs at a time when the economy was hurt because of high unemployment. We wrote an application to the state gave my wife an application, and she got the experience in running a program. We took that experience and that background and wrote a grant to the city, Area Manpower Planning Council, I think it was. And we employed 38 artists during that period each year to paint murals, to do art parks, to teach classes in senior citizen centers, community, Boys and Girls Club, even a hospital, South Philadelphia Hospital. 38 artists working in communities around the city. Again, trying to raise the average person's valuation for the role of art in education, youth development, community improvement. You know, so we were painting murals then. We highlighted, I think it was 1987, after that federal funding stopped, we kept doing it. And in 1987, we brought Keith Haring 2 years before he passed. I think he passed in 1989. But Keith Haring came with some kids from New York, and we brought our kids from Philly together, and we painted the Keith Haring mural around 22nd Street. Oh gosh, I can't remember the street. But it's in South Philly. It's got some play recently in the Sunday Inquirer, where the mural artists came a few years ago and repainted it. But there's a video on YouTube. If you go for the Keith Haring We the Youth mural, you'll see Brandywine painted that. In fact, I got one of my daughters, my youngest daughters, on his shoulders in the photograph, in the video. So if you don't, goes to another thing, if you don't document what you do, other people can erase it or forget about it. So Brandywine has always been like what art historians do. It's all about documentation and preservation, so that the story can be told going forward. And in this case, I hope that Brandywine's story is inspiring going forward to people that want to do something, be it in art or anything. But you don't always need money. You need people to believe in the vision and the mission, and you need people to give whatever they can give when you need it. And I've had the benefit of that for the last 50 years. So, does that answer your question? Okay. So in a sense, most of what you see happening now, they even have a course in college called Community Arts Learning, or whatever it's titled. So community arts comes out of the community. You don't create a college level course to tell people how to do it and then they go in the community and do it. That's like hiring mercenaries to go fight a war. You know, it's transactional. Okay? Art shouldn't be transactional like that. I gotta ask you a question, man. I think you've answered this. What do you attribute to your long tenure over 40 years at the National Gallery? I think you answered. So I'm gonna move to my next question. How do you envision the future of museums and their importance to society?
Okay, now that's a tough one.
I have no idea.
That's my last question.
Absolutely no idea. I think every museum in the country is in a state of transformation for a lot of reasons. Certainly, opening up their doors for DEIO projects has changed them. A lot of catching up to do. And COVID diminished the visitation, and so nobody has money to do the catching up. So I think it's impossible to, I would never even venture a guess as to what museums are going to be doing. And, a lot of not a lot, but most recently a museum at the University of New Hampshire, I think, closed its doors. It's not clear what's happening to the collection, and of course the Rose Art Museum tried to, but failed, and I think there will be collaborations. I know with the Liechtenstein Foundation we're making gifts in collaborative ways to museums that have connections to colleges, so that certain gifts can be shared between the museums and the colleges. And I think collaboration is going to be the only answer. But I don't know where the funding's going to come from. It's not my sense that younger people are particularly interested in the arts right now. Maybe that'll change, but and by younger people, I guess I mean under 30. Because I do know some over 30 that are still interested in the arts. Whether that would be where they put their money, I don't know. So I think maybe we should open up for questions.
We probably can, I can bring a mic so you can ask a question. It can be heard on the video. But are there questions out there?
Hi. You might have referred to this in some way, but I'm not sure. How did you balance your career with, did your art making, obviously if you were working full-time at the National Gallery for 40 years, you said it was 140 hours a week. So were you able to continue as a studio artist during that period at all, or if not, then how have you gone back to it?
I always continued, certainly not as much as I would have done if I wasn't at the museum. But usually when I would travel to do some museum job, I would stay extra time to draw. All the prints I did with Simmeling Tsukamoto, I did while I was with the National Gallery. I'd be out in California for some job and take an extra week or two. So that was how. And I did it very quietly. I just didn't want people to know I was doing it. I did come out in a funny way at some point, I can't remember when, it was in the 80s, I ran for the College Art Association board and said that I should be on the board because I had both studio experience and museum experience. And everybody at the National Gallery just came out, what are you talking about? Nobody knew anything about me. So the only model I knew and really respected, and they're about to make a film about him, was Jacob Kanan, who was the first prints and drawings curator in Washington. He was in New York. He was known as an artist, very, very brilliant in the range of what he was interested in, very involved with the WPA in one way or another. I met him in '75 when I was writing about Doc's Thrash for the Philadelphia Museum. And he worked his whole life, but never showed until he left his job. And then he showed. So, yeah, I think I would have gone crazy if I hadn't done anything. For 5 years, I didn't do anything, actually. For the first 5 years, I sort of said, there are enough artists in the world. If I'm not dying to do this, they don't need me. And so, after that 5 years, I became dying to do it. I'd given away lots of supplies. So after 5 years.
Are there other questions?
Allan, I'm wondering what was the initial genesis, at the very beginning of Brandywine, and where did the funding come from to allow an enterprise like that to begin to launch?
Well, what had happened, I was working for a period of time with Prints in Progress, which was the outreach program, as I said, for the Print Club. And it was underplanned and underfunded. Kippy Stroud, who later founded the Fabric Workshop, was the engine. She was the driver of everything that happened with Prints in Progress, and she wanted to have a program to not just teach the kids in the neighborhood how to make cards and gift items, but to really train some teenagers in edition printing. So I did that for about 9 months, and then the board of the Print Center said that there was no money, it was unplanned. So they closed the program down, and I was let go. Eventually, I got hired by the school district. So this was happening in my first year after my BFA. And so as soon as I got the job with the school district, I went back to that garage, which had not been rented. It was a 2-story garage on Spring Garden Street, 1923 Brandywine Street in the Spring Garden community. So I got my job, and I think the rent was $135 for 2 floors. It was about 13 feet wide, 40 feet deep. I paid the rent. Sam Brown, who was a teacher, educator in the school district, paid the phone. Leon Hicks from Leon University was on the first board. He gave us an etching press. And furniture and equipment we made. I had a station wagon. I mean, this is how poor we were. I had a station wagon. I would go around the neighborhoods on trash day looking for doors and tables and chairs. And that was the first furniture. And so we started with nothing. But if you're patient, you're strategic, you're committed. I had all this because I had support. I had a supportive wife who knew what I was accomplishing at the Prints in Progress program, because I had the kids producing edition prints, selling for $35 when they were selling for $65 and $75 at the gallery downtown for the professional artists. So I knew I could do it, and this way I was able to bring, within about 6 months, I brought the teenagers I had started training, I brought them back in. And then I had people like Libby Newman. Libby was president of the Artist Equity Association. She was an early supporter of my efforts. And she would come in and say, let's make a print, So her and a few other artists allowed my teenagers to make prints. So then in '74, we got incorporated. We did that for 2 years, all volunteer. I even people gave me paper. I go to paper shops and they give me paper, scavenger. So after we got the tax exemption, we were able to start raising a few dollars. I'll never forget, the first grant we got was for $2,000 from the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. And we gave 100% of it to Romeo Beard. So he would come to Philly, receive our first Lifetime Achievement Award, and get $2,000 for talking about Henry Oscar Taylor. That's what we did. So you work so that when you apply for a grant, you got some history, some programming history to talk about. That's why we're waiting. Throughout the years, I got a chance to serve on the Pennsylvania Council, the National Endowment, 5 or 6 state art councils. And I got some recognition for Brandywine. And it made it harder to get artists from other communities to apply to want to come to Brandywine. So when you start applying for the national grants, they look at they're not going to fund it if you serve, 20 artists and all from Philadelphia. Let Philadelphia take on that responsibility to fund their opportunities. But when you go national, then you're talking about the National Endowment, you're talking about Nathan Cummings Foundation in New York, you're talking about other places. So we did that, and then we got more recognition locally to apply to William Penn and Pew and some of the other larger local foundations. But it was really tight for decades. The CETA grant gave us the most visibility because it was 100% funded. All the salaries were funded, and I think it was about maybe 16 or 17% of that budget could be used for administration. So we hired a coordinator, and some of the artists we hired, we asked them to be coordinators for different areas of the city. So it's step by step, little steps to take bigger steps strategically. Build the brand, build the reputation, build community favor. By going into all these communities, we also connected with community development organizations. And so when we did a big outdoor project like Keith Aaron's mural, we had the Point Breeze Federation 100% behind us. So the mural was painted, and the senior citizens got together and planted flowers and stuff and did some greenery in front of the mural, which is all going now, but that's how we did it, And when I think back, what we've achieved from starting with zero, just a commitment among a small group of people to do something where nothing existed or had ever existed. We also built community through the connections of those artists. Ruth will tell you there's a community among curators and art historians and museum professionals. There's communities. Just like in sports, you may start with one team, you get traded to another team. When the game is over, they all hug like they've known each other, like they're really close, and they weren't. Because if you shared a locker room for 1 year, 2 years, you get to know about that person. So in the professional sport world, or even in college, these communities. But for African American, other artists of color, we had no space to build community. We didn't look to build bricks and mortar. We knew that was important to execute work, make creativity happen. But it couldn't be what this place was built on. When it was built, this is a magnificent institution. They don't build it like this anymore. But no matter how magnificent this institution is, its imprint, its value comes from the people in the institution. The leadership, the staff, the programs that it manages and produces. So that's how we did it. It was more conceptual, but it was always strategic. How do we get from here to there? And I'm writing a book about it now because I think it's important. It's really important.
It's like you said before, the importance of documentation. When you
Yes.
put that on Ruth, it's great to hear that you're doing that.
Yes.
That memoir would be very important, I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
I believe we have come to the end of this
We
program.
have 4 more minutes.
We have 4 more minutes?
Can I
Okay.
ask a question?
Oh.
Sorry to be so long with it.
Sorry.
I like talking about
I mean, that was amazing. I mean, I have questions for both of you, but I wanted to know first, I'll ask both of my questions and then you can ignore them if you want to. But Allan, what you were saying about being strategic, I'm curious about how you be strategic in a time when you don't know what the future is going to bring and you just have to believe and you have to do. You go out looking for furniture, hoping that it's going to work. I think a lot of us, people want strategic thinkers, but sometimes it's hard to see, the future and know and believe and just move forward. So that's my question for you, how to be strategic in challenging moments. And then Ruth, I was reading about something you wrote recently for the Brooklyn Rail, and you talked a little bit about printmaking and how you worked with artists. And I wonder if you could articulate at all how working with printmaking in your process helped you be a better curator and a better somebody who worked well with artists and thinks well with artists?
Well, it wasn't only artists, it was also printers. I think it was useful that people knew they didn't have to start at ground zero, that they could start at 50%, and I would know where they were, and we could just go on from there. With artists, everyone's different. And so how you work with them depends on how you connect with them. I mean, these are, you don't connect with everybody. And the same with printers. I mean, I've talked to printers that are very good printers, and I just know I couldn't work with them. And so it's like a marriage in a way. I mean, you're trusting someone. In the case of an artist, if you're doing a show, they're trusting you to do the best show possible. And if, in the case of working with a printer, you're expecting them to understand your MO and respond to it. I mean, one of the most interesting exhibition situations was when I did a Frankenthaler retrospective in '93, and she came down. Well, first of all, I sent her a list of what I wanted to use, and then she came back to me and said, well, I don't think you should use this, you should use that, and, maybe if, let's say the show was 70 prints, I don't remember, so let's say 20 of them, she said you should change. And I went up to the studio and we talked, and it was really interesting because she convinced me which was right in some instances, and I convinced her it was right in some instances. And I didn't have that exact experience with somebody else. I mean, some artists don't tell you to do anything. They just let you do what you want to do. I mean, with Lichtenstein, when we did a show of his prints right around the same time as Frankenthaler, it was the first time his pre-pop work had been shown with his pop work. And I'm not really sure why he allowed that to happen, but somehow he did. It's because we were doing a catalog raisonné and they were going to be in there, so maybe that's why. When Johns came down to look at a layout of his show, there was a corner, and let's say there would be an ale cans here and a Savarin can here, and 2 ale cans and 2 Savarin cans. And he wanted them changed so that if you closed it up, they would be reflecting each other. And that was the only thing he changed, but it was really important. So, that's why I guess when I said before, it's never boring, because you really never know what you're going to be up against. There are no two situations were the same. I mean, I can talk about Richard Serra in a negative way. When I did the Gemini catalog in '64, we sent biographies to every artist. Let's say there were 50 or 60 artists. And they all sent, some didn't respond, some sent specific, please put I said you have to keep it the same length, but I'm happy to, if there's something in here you don't want, tell me and I'll put it in. If there's anything wrong, tell me. And from Richard Serra, I got back a 24-page biography from his lawyer and said, this is Richard Serra's biography. Well, nothing got changed in his, and I spent time with him over the years, but he was not somebody I felt like working with, and everyone who worked with him loved him. We didn't hit it off. An equally difficult artist is Michael Heiser, and we did hit it off. So it's not about whether they're difficult or you are, it's just whether you hit it off or not.
I'll try to be short. The question is, how do you be strategic in this environment when everything is evolving and changing so fast? A lot of that based in technology, which is changing the nature of how we engage with audiences, how institutions engage with them. But in these challenging times, and it is painful for one that watches, can't help but watching the news constantly, it's a lot of pain, okay, a lot of uncertainty. But I go back to what Martin Luther King said. He said, dreams are finite. They can be realized. You know, all artists are dreamers. Am I right? Am I wrong? Okay. You create something, you hope it finds an audience. And you hope that audience pays for it so you can keep creating more, right? There's a risk involved. You take a chance, right? So if you dream, and I dreamed big early on, but I was patient, see, because I knew it took money and support and people to make something valuable. It had to be collaborative if it was going to have any value. One person could not do it. So if you're in a circle of people that are giving you that positive energy, right? Think about what the circle Martin Luther King had. Things were so desperate. The outcome was so uncertain. His life was in jeopardy every day. But he said, dreams are finite, but hope is infinite. And I hang my hat on that. Because if we give up hope that we can't do some of the things that we think are important to do, then what's the sense of getting out of the bed in the morning? You have a platform. Institutions like this have a platform. What are you, almost 200 years old or 200 years old? For anyone that's only 50 years old. But I never thought about the platform that longevity provides, time. So all this stuff that somebody starting out fresh would have to do to get to this place, you're there already. So now, and time is always evolving. It's just like now it seems like it's so rapid, it's so fast because of AI and technology, and who's going to come to a museum unless you, like you say, have partnerships and make museums more interactive, make them human, more human than I think they have been in the past, you know? You bring in audiences. You might bring in a jazz concert. Museums are doing that now. Even the orchestras bringing in jazz musicians. You know, classical music is going to hip hop. You evolve. You change with the time, but you have your core mission and your core values that you want to hold on to tight, but never give up hope. And that's what I can leave you with. Okay.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you all
Thank you.
for listening.